I've complicated feelings about the film. Once I get there, it's all about making love and having strange sexual adventures. So I had a little problem with the film.
A few pieces of plastic, some strategically placed metal, and a rolling camera. That's all it took to create one of Jane Fonda's most embarrassing Hollywood moments. While filming the sci-fi oddity Barbarella, a costume designed to be revealing failed spectacularly, falling off in the middle of a scene. This wasn't just a minor slip-up. It was a full-blown on-set catastrophe that perfectly summed up her miserable experience. We're uncovering the untold story of this infamous wardrobe malfunction and how it changed her forever. An icon's humiliation. The costume itself was a masterpiece of impracticality. Designed by the avant-garde fashion designer Paco Rabanne, it wasn't made of fabric, but of metal, plastic, and chainmail. These were not clothes. They were wearable sculptures that looked incredible, but were never intended for movement. Each piece of the spacesuit had to be carefully removed, while Fonda was dangling in midair, a process that was both physically demanding and incredibly awkward. The thing nobody tells you is that the concept of zero gravity was achieved by sandwiching her between two massive panes of plexiglass, with the camera shooting up from below. This created the illusion of floating but made every movement slow and clumsy. This is where the infamous wardrobe malfunctions began. The costumes were held together by fragile links and clasps that were never designed for the strain of filming. During the countless takes required for the opening scene, pieces would constantly slip, break, or simply fall off at the wrong moment. Fonda found herself in a state of constant anxiety, more focused on preventing an accidental exposure than on her actual performance. The crew would have to stop, lower her down, painstakingly reassemble the outfit, and start all over again. To put it mildly, the experience was grueling. Fonda spent hours suspended in the uncomfortable rig, the hard edges of the plastic and metal costume digging into her skin. What was supposed to be a fun, sexy scene became a torturous exercise in repetition and frustration. She felt less like a powerful heroine and more like a puppet whose strings and costume could break at any second. Her director, who was also her husband at the time, Roger Vadim, seemed more interested in capturing the perfect alluring shot than in her comfort or dignity. He pushed for more revealing angles, adding to her sense of being treated like an object rather than an actress. While there wasn't one single "it all fell off" moment that made the final cut, the constant failure of the wardrobe during this and other scenes became the defining feature of the production for Fonda. It wasn't just one accident. It was a persistent, rolling disaster. Every time a piece slipped, it was a small humiliation. She was the star of the film, yet she had no control over her own body or how it was being presented. This feeling of powerlessness on the Barbarella set would plant a seed of anger and resentment that would later blossom into full-blown activism. She had come to Rome a rising star, but she would leave feeling like a prop in a fantasy she never wanted to be a part of. The world saw a cosmic queen, but all Fonda remembered was the feeling of her costume coming undone. An unlikely space queen. To understand why the Barbarella experience was so profoundly frustrating for Jane Fonda, you have to understand who she was before she ever stepped into that spaceship. She wasn't just another actress looking for a big break. She was Hollywood royalty, the daughter of the legendary actor Henry Fonda. Born in New York City in 1937, Jane grew up in the shadow of a cinematic giant. Her father was known for playing noble, morally upright American heroes in films like The Grapes of Wrath and 12 Angry Men. He was an icon of integrity and seriousness on screen. However, the thing nobody tells you is that behind closed doors, Henry Fonda was an emotionally distant and demanding father. Jane and her brother Peter grew up craving his approval, which he rarely gave. This complicated upbringing was further shattered by immense tragedy. When Jane was just 12 years old, her mother, the socialite Frances Ford Seymour, took her own life. This devastating event shaped Jane's entire life, leaving her with deep-seated feelings of insecurity and a complicated relationship with the world of fame that her father inhabited. You see, she didn't rush into acting. Initially, she pursued other interests, studying art in Paris and working as a model, even appearing on the cover of Vogue twice. Her path changed when she met the iconic acting coach Lee Strasberg. He saw a raw, untapped talent in her and convinced her to join his prestigious actors' studio. It was there that she finally began to see acting not as her father's profession, but as her own craft. Her early film roles in the early 1960s showcased her versatility. She starred in comedies like Tall Story and dramas such as Walk on the Wild Side. She quickly proved she was more than just Henry Fonda's daughter. She was a talented actress in her own right, earning a Golden Globe for Most Promising Newcomer. Her life took another dramatic turn when she met the French film director Roger Vadim. Vadim was a notorious figure, known for his stylish films and his habit of turning his romantic partners into on-screen symbols of sensuality. He had previously done so with Brigitte Bardot and Catherine Deneuve. When he met Jane, he was captivated by what he saw as her all-American innocence and was determined to transform her into his next European-style muse. They married in 1965, and her career took a sharp turn toward the continent. Vadim cast her in a series of French films that emphasized her looks, often putting her in revealing situations. What many overlooked is that this was a period of intense conflict for Fonda. She was a serious actress, trained in the craft of authentic performance. Yet her husband was pushing her into roles that were all about surface-level allure. When Vadim decided to adapt the risque French comic book Barbarella, he saw it as the ultimate vehicle to complete his transformation of Jane Fonda. She, on the other hand, was deeply hesitant. The character was the opposite of the complex, dramatic roles she wanted to play. But, caught in the dynamics of her marriage and career, she reluctantly agreed. She went into the project already feeling like she was compromising her artistic integrity, setting the stage for a cinematic collision. This was a woman who craved respect, not just attention. Chaos in the cosmos. The set of Barbarella was less like a professional film production and more like a chaotic, multilingual circus. From the very beginning, the project was plagued by a fundamental lack of cohesion that made every day a new adventure in filmmaking frustration. The entire movie was shot at a studio in Rome, which immediately created a massive language barrier. The director, Roger Vadim, was French. The star, Jane Fonda, was American. The producer, Dino De Laurentiis, was Italian. The crew was a mix of all three nationalities and more, many of whom could not effectively communicate with one another. Imagine trying to explain a complex costume issue or a concern about a dangerous stunt when half the people you are talking to don't speak your language. This was Jane Fonda's daily reality. Simple requests would get lost in translation, leading to mistakes, delays, and mounting frustration. The set was a modern-day Tower of Babel, with gaffers shouting in Italian, cinematographers planning in French, and an American star trying to make sense of it all. This chaotic environment meant that there was very little sense of a unified team working toward a common goal. Instead, it often felt like several different crews were making several different movies at the same time. Adding to the chaos was the film's highly experimental and often dysfunctional special effects. The 1960s were a time before computer-generated imagery, so every futuristic effect had to be created practically. To put it mildly, the methods were often bizarre and unreliable. The famous zero-gravity scenes were shot using the uncomfortable plexiglass rig, but other effects were even stranger. The Labyrinth of Love was a maze of plastic walls that would often fall over. The deadly dolls that attack Barbarella were simply puppets, on sticks that crew members would jiggle from off-screen. Many of the fantastical sets, while visually stunning, were poorly constructed and prone to breaking. At the center of it all was Roger Vadim's singular, almost obsessive vision. He was less concerned with crafting a coherent story and more focused on creating a series of visually stunning, dreamlike vignettes starring his wife. He prioritized aesthetics over everything else, including plot, character development, and his lead actress's comfort. When Fonda would voice her concerns about a scene being too revealing or a costume being too impractical, Vadim would often dismiss her. To him, her image as the sensual space goddess was the entire point of the film. This creative clash between husband and wife, director and star, created a palpable tension that hung over the entire production. What many overlooked is the sheer physical toll the film took on Fonda. The long hours, the uncomfortable costumes, and the often dangerous wire work left her exhausted and bruised. There was a sense that the production was spiraling out of control, held together only by Vadim's stubborn vision and the crew's sheer will to get through the day. The constant wardrobe malfunctions were not an isolated problem. They were a symptom of a much larger disease. They were the physical manifestation of a production where the star's needs were secondary to the director's fantasy. The costume falling off was almost inevitable on a set that was itself constantly coming apart at the seams. The beautiful chaos on screen was hiding a much messier reality. The cult classic she hated. When Barbarella was released in 1968, it was met with a mix of confusion and fascination. Critics didn't quite know what to make of its psychedelic visuals and campy tone, and it wasn't a major box office success. For Jane Fonda, it felt like a professional and personal failure. She had endured a miserable production only to star in a film that, at the time, seemed destined for obscurity. She was eager to move on and put the entire experience behind her, hoping the world would forget about the space siren in the flimsy plastic armor. But the world had other plans. Over the years, something strange happened. Barbarella started to find its audience. It became a midnight movie staple, celebrated for its unique style, its unapologetic weirdness, and its ahead-of-its-time visuals. It was reevaluated not as a failed blockbuster, but as a cult classic, a perfect time capsule of late 60s counterculture. The character of Barbarella, and the look Fonda so despised, became iconic. The very costumes that had caused her so much grief were now hailed as legendary pieces of fashion history, inspiring designers and artists for decades to come. The thing nobody tells you is that this ironic twist of fate was deeply complicated for Fonda. As Barbarella's cult status grew, she was simultaneously undergoing a profound personal and political transformation. The feelings of powerlessness and objectification she experienced on that set became a catalyst. She was tired of being seen as just a pretty face or a director's muse. She wanted to have a voice. In the late 60s and early 70s, she dove headfirst into political activism, becoming one of the most prominent and controversial voices against the Vietnam War. She traveled, she protested, and she used her platform to fight for social justice. This was the birth of Hanoi Jane, a firebrand activist who was the polar opposite of the naive, pleasure-seeking Barbarella. She cut her hair, traded in the glamorous gowns for simple, practical clothes, and began choosing film roles that were dramatically different. She started producing her own movies, taking control of her career in a way she never could have under Vadim's direction. She went on to win 2 Academy Awards for Best Actress for her powerful performances in Clute and Coming Home, proving to the world and to herself that she was a serious, formidable talent. Her journey from the sci-fi bombshell of Barbarella to a respected, Oscar-winning actress and activist is one of the most remarkable transformations in Hollywood history. For decades, the mere mention of Barbarella was a topic she would shut down entirely. It wasn't just a film in her past. It was a profound source of embarrassment, a ghost from a time when her voice felt silenced, and her image was crafted by others. She saw it as a painful chapter where her agency was stripped away and she was molded into a sci-fi siren against her will. The infamous wardrobe malfunction became emblematic of this struggle. More than a simple on-set accident, it was a deeply public moment of exposure, a physical manifestation of her feeling of powerlessness under the industry's and her director's gaze. However, the passage of time has a way of softening the hardest edges. As new generations discovered the movie and celebrated its campy, quirky charm, her perspective began to shift. The initial bitterness gave way to a wry, distant amusement. She learned to appreciate its undeniable impact on pop culture, recognizing it not as a personal failure, but as a peculiar glittering artifact of its era. The woman who once fought to keep a fragile costume intact had transcended it completely. She reclaimed her narrative, not on a soundstage, but on the front lines of activism and through a celebrated career built on her own terms. Her true legacy was forged in fighting for causes that truly mattered, proving far more powerful and enduring than any metal bikini. Was Barbarella a moment of exploitation? Or was it the accidental catalyst that created a powerful feminist voice? Let us know what you think. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more Hollywood history.